The observation deck of the Galactic Council station hummed with quiet efficiency as Ambassador Zethkar reviewed the latest reports from the Outer Rim territories. The reptilian diplomat's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of mild concern among his species. 3 more civilizations had gone silent in the past cycle, bringing the total to 17 lost colonies in what the humans called the Orion Arm. Another distress beacon. Ambassador, his aide reported, manipulating the holographic display with practiced ease. This time from the Vorthan Mining Collective on Kepler 442b. Zethkar's throat sac inflated with a weary sigh. The Vorthons were a peaceful species, known throughout the galaxy for their exceptional engineering skills and their beautiful crystal sculptures. They had been among the first to welcome humanity into the Galactic Council 47 years ago, despite many species' reservations about the newcomers. Have we received any response from the human territories? Zethkar asked, though he already knew the answer. The humans had been peculiarly quiet lately, their usually chatty diplomatic channels reduced to formal acknowledgments and routine trade confirmations. Nothing beyond standard protocol, sir. Their embassy staff claims their government is conducting some sort of internal review of colonial policies. Zethkar found this explanation troubling. In his decades of diplomatic service, he had learned to read between the lines of various species' communication patterns. The humans, despite their relative newcomer status, had quickly established themselves as enthusiastic participants in galactic affairs. They were curious to a fault, always asking questions, proposing joint ventures, and offering assistance to struggling colonies. This sudden withdrawal from galactic discourse was entirely out of character. The ambassador accessed his personal files, reviewing humanity's integration into the Council. When they had first emerged from their home system, humans had been refreshingly straightforward compared to many species. They possessed an unusual combination of traits that had both impressed and concerned the galactic community. Their technology, while not the most advanced, showed remarkable adaptability. Their military capabilities were extensive, though they claimed to have largely abandoned warfare among themselves. What had truly set humans apart was their response to the galaxy's various crises. When the Centauri plague had threatened to wipe out entire star systems, human medical researchers had worked around the clock to develop treatments. When the Andromedan pirates had terrorized shipping lanes, human patrol ships had volunteered for the most dangerous escort missions. They seemed to possess an instinctive drive to help others, even at considerable cost to themselves. Sir, his aide interrupted his thoughts. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Tethys system. It's not good. The holographic display shifted to show a haggard Aquarian commander, her normally pristine blue skin mottled with stress marks. Behind her, Zethkar could see the chaos of a military command center. Officers rushing between stations, alarm lights flashing. Galactic Council. This is Commander Reefdahl of the Tethys Defense Force. We are under attack by unknown vessels. They appeared without warning and began systematic destruction of our outer colonies. We estimate 40 million casualties so far. Our defensive fleet has been eliminated. We're requesting immediate assistance from any council member with available forces. The transmission ended abruptly, replaced by static. Zethkar's scales shifted to a deep purple, the color of profound shock among his people. 40 million casualties. The number was almost incomprehensible. The Aquarians were a peaceful species, their entire civilization built around artistic expression and philosophical contemplation. They had no enemies, no territorial disputes, no reason for anyone to attack them. Get me the Council emergency session protocols, Zethkar ordered, and send priority messages to all member species military commands. We need to know who has available forces in that region. As his aide worked frantically at the communication array, Zethkar found himself thinking about the humans again. Their home system was relatively close to Tethys, perhaps 2 weeks' travel at maximum hyperspace velocity. If anyone could respond quickly, it would be them. But the humans' recent silence troubled him. During the integration process, their military liaisons had been asked about human combat doctrines and strategic capabilities. The information provided had been extensive but somehow felt incomplete, as if the humans were holding something back. When pressed, they had explained that much of their military history was considered classified for cultural sensitivity reasons. The Council had accepted this explanation, though it had generated considerable debate. Most member species were open about their martial capabilities, viewing military strength as a matter of practical diplomacy. The humans' reticence had been attributed to their apparent embarrassment about their species' violent past. Now, as Zethkar watched the casualty reports from Tethys climb ever higher, he wondered if there was more to human discretion than simple cultural shame. "Ambassador," his aide called out, voice tight with worry. "I'm getting reports from multiple systems. These attacks aren't isolated. Someone is conducting coordinated strikes across the entire outer rim. The pattern suggests they're moving inward toward the core worlds." Zethkar felt his blood chill. A coordinated assault on this scale required massive resources, extensive planning, and military capabilities that exceeded anything in the known galaxy. No member species possessed such strength, and the few hostile entities they had encountered before had been dealt with through diplomatic channels or limited police actions. "Any word from the human embassy?" "I've sent 3 priority requests, sir." "No response yet." The ambassador stared at the tactical display showing the pattern of attacks. Each red marker represented a destroyed world, millions of lives snuffed out without warning. The attackers, whoever they were, showed no interest in conquest or negotiation. This was extermination, pure and simple. As the reports continued to flow in, Zethkar made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He authorized the transmission of a code black emergency signal, the highest priority distress call in the galactic communication network. It was a signal that had never been used before, designed for only the most catastrophic circumstances. The message was simple and direct. Galactic Council to all member species. "We are under systematic attack by unknown hostile forces. Multiple worlds have been destroyed. All available military assets are requested to respond immediately to defend core worlds." This is not a drill. The signal propagated across the galaxy at faster than light speeds, reaching every inhabited system within hours. In the human territories buried deep within classified military installations, automated systems registered the incoming code black signal. And then, after 47 years of carefully maintained peace, humanity's war protocols came online. Admiral Sarah Chen had been enjoying her morning coffee when the klaxons began screaming throughout Terra Command. The sound cut through the peaceful atmosphere of Earth's orbital headquarters like a blade, sending personnel scrambling to their stations. In her 30 years of service, she had heard those alarms during drills, but never with the particular tone sequence that now echoed through the corridors. "Admiral to Command Center." Immediately, the intercom crackled with barely controlled urgency. Chen was already moving, her coffee forgotten as she strode through hallways suddenly alive with activity. Officers ran past her, their faces showing the kind of controlled panic that came from training taking over when the unthinkable happened. She had seen that look before, during the final days of the corporate wars, when humanity had decided that never again would they be caught unprepared. The command center doors hissed open, revealing a scene of orchestrated chaos. Every station was manned, holographic displays showed star maps with pulsing red indicators, and the massive central screen displayed a single, terrifying message. "Code black received. War protocols active." "Report," Chen commanded as she took her position at the command platform. "Ma'am," Captain Martinez, her chief of staff, stepped forward with a data pad. "Approximately 4 hours ago, we received a code black emergency signal from the Galactic Council. The message indicates systematic attacks on multiple member worlds by unknown hostile forces. Casualty estimates are in the hundreds of millions and climbing." Chen felt something cold settle in her stomach. Humanity had hoped, had genuinely believed, that their days of large-scale warfare were behind them. The corporate wars had been brutal enough to convince their entire species that peace was worth almost any price. They had joined the Galactic Council with genuine enthusiasm for a universe where conflicts could be resolved through negotiation and compromise. "Show me the attack pattern," she ordered. The central display shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red indicators marked destroyed or silent worlds spreading in a deliberate pattern from the outer rim toward the core. The tactical analysis was clear. This was not random violence or territorial expansion. Someone was systematically exterminating Council member species. "Intelligence assessment?" Chen asked. Commander Torres, head of xenological analysis, stepped forward. Ma'am, the attack pattern suggests capabilities beyond anything in our databases. The speed of the assault, the coordination across multiple star systems, the complete destruction of defending forces. We're looking at technology and numbers that exceed every known civilization in the galaxy. Could this be an unknown member species gone rogue? Negative, Admiral. The resource requirements alone would have been impossible to hide. Someone brought a massive force from outside our region of the galaxy, or... Torres paused, clearly reluctant to voice his next thought. Or what, Commander? Or this is an extragalactic invasion force, ma'am. The command center fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of the alert klaxons. An extragalactic threat was humanity's nightmare scenario, something they had planned for but hoped never to face. During the corporate wars, when human military doctrine had been refined through brutal experience, strategists had wondered what would happen if humanity encountered a truly superior force with genocidal intentions. The answer had shaped every military decision humanity made. Afterward, status of Protocol 7? Chen asked quietly. Martinez consulted his datapad, his face grim. All defense grids are coming online. The Arsenal ships are beginning their activation sequences. Deep space monitoring stations report detection of several unidentified vessel groups moving toward Council core worlds. Time to full readiness? 18 hours for standard forces, Admiral. 72 hours for full Protocol 7 implementation. Chen nodded, then activated her personal communicator. Get me President Harrison immediately. While waiting for the connection, she studied the tactical display more carefully. The attacking force was methodical, efficient, and showed no interest in preserving anything they encountered. Every world hit had been sterilized completely. No survivors, no infrastructure left intact, no apparent attempt at occupation or resource extraction. Admiral Chen. President Harrison's voice came through the secure channel. I assume you've seen the galactic situation? Yes, Mr. President. Requesting permission to implement full war protocols. There was a long pause. Chen could imagine the weight of the decision pressing down on the civilian leadership. Humanity had spent decades building relationships with dozens of species, creating trade networks, cultural exchanges, and genuine friendships. The idea of revealing their true military capabilities they had carefully hidden for nearly half a century, would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed them. Admiral, the President's voice was heavy with resignation. As of this moment, you are authorized to implement all necessary protocols for the defense of Earth and allied worlds. The Cabinet has been briefed. We understand the implications. Understood, sir. We'll do everything we can to minimize the revelation of our capabilities while still providing effective assistance. I'm afraid that may not be possible, Admiral. These attacks, they're not just targeting random worlds. Intelligence suggests they're specifically hitting species that joined the Council in the last 50 years. They're targeting our friends. Chen felt her jaw clench. That changed everything. If the attackers were specifically targeting species that had aligned with humanity's more peaceful vision of galactic cooperation, then this was personal in a way that made diplomatic considerations secondary. Mr. President, with respect, I believe we're past the point of half measures. I agree, Admiral. Do what you must. The connection ended and Chen turned back to her staff. Every face in the command center was watching her, waiting for orders that would reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. All stations, this is Admiral Chen. As of this moment, we are implementing full war protocols. Authorization codes are being distributed now. Begin immediate deployment of all available assets to threatened systems. Priority targets are any world currently under attack or showing signs of incoming hostile forces. She paused, thinking of the peaceful Aquarians, the artistic Vorthans, the gentle philosophers and traders and artists that made up so much of the galactic community. Somewhere out there, an enemy was systematically destroying them, apparently for the crime of believing in cooperation over conquest. And begin preparation of the Arsenal ships if this enemy wants a war. Chen's voice carried across the command center with cold determination. They're about to discover why humanity spent 300 years perfecting the art of total warfare before we ever left our home system. Throughout human space, hidden installations began powering up systems that had remained dormant for decades. Ships that looked like peaceful explorers began extending weapon systems that had been carefully concealed. Space stations revealed their true nature as massive defense platforms. And in the deepest vaults of the arsenal worlds, machines began the process of awakening weapons that humanity had hoped never to use again. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's peace had not come from weakness, but from the terrible knowledge of what they were capable of when truly provoked. The first human ships to arrive at the Tethys system were nothing like what the surviving Aquarians expected. Commander Reefdahl, broadcasting from a makeshift command center deep within Tethys Prime's ocean trenches, had been hoping for a small escort fleet or perhaps a reconnaissance vessel. What emerged from hyperspace were ships that defied every assumption the galactic community had made about human military capabilities. The lead vessel was massive, easily 3 times the length of the largest known council warship, but its design was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Where most species built their military vessels with obvious weapon emplacements and defensive structures, this ship looked almost organic, its hull flowing in curves that seemed to shift and adapt as Reefdahl watched through her deep-sea sensors. Tethys Defense Force. This is Admiral Zhang aboard the Terra vessel Harmony's End. We're reading multiple hostile contacts in your system. Please transmit your current tactical situation. Reefdahl's gills fluttered with confusion and hope. The human vessel's sensor capabilities were apparently far more sophisticated than expected. Her own detection systems had lost track of the attacking ships hours ago when they had moved to the outer system. Admiral Zhang, this is Commander Reefdahl. We've lost contact with all surface installations and our orbital defenses. The attacking force consists of approximately 30 vessels of unknown configuration. They've systematically destroyed every settlement and defensive position we have. Our casualties, her voice broke slightly. We estimate 73 million dead, Admiral. There was a moment of silence on the channel. When Admiral Zhang spoke again, his voice carried a tone that made Reefdahl's survival instincts trigger involuntarily. Commander, we're going to need you to maintain your position and avoid any surface activity for the next several hours. We'll handle the hostile force. Admiral, with respect, you have 1 ship. The attackers have 30, and they destroyed our entire defense fleet without taking a single loss. Commander, I need you to trust me, and I need you to record everything you're about to witness. The galactic community is going to have questions. Before Reefdahl could respond, her sensors detected something that made no sense. The human ship was dividing. What she had taken for a single massive vessel was revealing itself to be something else entirely. Sections of the hull were separating, each piece deploying its own engines and weapon systems. Within minutes, the single ship had become a fleet of 12 independent vessels, each one larger than the biggest Aquarian warship. How is that possible? She whispered to her sensor operator. I don't know, Commander. Our databases show no technology capable of that kind of modular design. The power requirements alone should be impossible. On her display, the human fleet was arranging itself in a formation that looked almost like a living organism spreading its tendrils throughout the system. Each vessel moved with purpose and coordination that suggested a level of tactical integration beyond anything the Council had achieved. Then the hostiles appeared on her sensors again. The attacking fleet had been lurking beyond the system's outer planets, apparently waiting to see if any response force would arrive. They emerged from concealment in their familiar formation, a wedge of 30 identical vessels, each one bristling with weapons that had effortlessly carved through Aquarian defenses. Reefdahl watched in fascination and terror as the two forces approached each other. The tactical display showed the human ships spreading out, seemingly positioning themselves to be surrounded by the larger enemy force. It looked like tactical suicide. Admiral Zhang, she called out. You're allowing them to envelop your formation. You need to withdraw immediately. Negative, Commander. Beginning engagement in 3, 2, 1. What happened next would be discussed in galactic military academies for generations to come. The human ships didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, space around the hostile fleet began to change. Reefdahl's sensors registered massive gravitational fluctuations, as if the fabric of reality itself was being manipulated. The attacking vessels, which had shown no reaction to conventional weapons, suddenly found themselves caught in gravitational wells that appeared from nowhere. 3 of the hostile ships simply collapsed in on themselves, crushed by forces that bent spacetime around them. The remaining vessels tried to break formation, but discovered that the space they were moving through was no longer behaving according to normal physics. Gravitational manipulation, Reefdahl breathed. They're weaponizing spacetime itself. But that was only the beginning. From the human vessels, beams of energy emerged that didn't behave like any weapon system in the known galaxy. These weren't lasers or particle beams. They looked almost like controlled lightning, arcing and branching through space to strike multiple targets simultaneously. When they hit the hostile ships, the effect was devastating. The alien vessels didn't just explode. They seemed to break apart at the molecular level, their hulls dissolving into component atoms that scattered like glowing dust. Within 20 minutes of engagement, the hostile fleet was completely destroyed. Not damaged, not disabled. Completely annihilated without leaving behind any wreckage large enough for analysis. The human fleet began to reconsolidate, the separate vessels flowing back together to reform their original configuration. But Admiral Zhang wasn't finished. Commander Reefdahl, we're detecting additional hostile forces approaching your system. Please maintain defensive positions while we expand our operational area. Additional forces. Admiral, our sensors aren't showing anything. They're approximately 47 light hours out, moving at significant sublight velocity. We estimate they'll arrive in your system in approximately 18 hours. Reefdahl exchanged shocked looks with her staff. The human sensors could detect approaching vessels at distances that should have been impossible. More concerning was the implication that there were more attackers coming, and that the 30 ships they had just witnessed being destroyed were merely an advance force. How many ships are we talking about? Admiral? Current count is approximately 300 vessels, Commander. Similar configuration to the ones we just engaged. The command center fell silent. 300 ships. Even with the incredible capabilities she had just witnessed, surely 12 human vessels couldn't face such overwhelming numbers. Admiral Zhang, you need to withdraw immediately and call for reinforcements. 300 ships. Commander, Zhang interrupted, and she could hear something like grim amusement in his voice. I appreciate your concern, but you should know that what you just witnessed was our patrol response. We haven't even begun to deploy our actual military assets yet. As if summoned by his words, Reefdahl's sensors detected new contacts emerging from hyperspace throughout the system. Not ships. These signatures were far too massive to be vessels. They looked more like mobile space stations. The readings made no sense. Admiral, what are those? Those, Commander, are arsenal ships. Think of them as mobile weapons platforms. Each one carries enough firepower to sterilize a small star system. Reefdahl counted the new arrivals. 12 arsenal ships, each one the size of a major space station, arranged themselves throughout the Tethys system. From her position deep beneath the ocean, she watched as humanity revealed just a tiny fraction of the military, might they had been quietly building for decades. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a terrifying thought began to form. If this was just their patrol response, what would happen when they decided to go on the offensive? Ambassador Zethkar stood in the Galactic Council's emergency session chamber, his scales shifting through colors that had no name in any other species' language. Around him, representatives from dozens of civilizations struggled to process the tactical recordings that Commander Reefdahl had transmitted from the Tethys system. The Cetian delegate, whose species prided themselves on logical analysis, spoke first. These readings must be in error. No single species possesses technology capable of gravitational manipulation at this scale. The recordings have been verified by 3 independent sensor networks, replied the Andromedan representative, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. We must face the possibility that humanity has been less than forthcoming about their military capabilities. Zethkar had remained silent throughout the initial debate, but now he accessed his personal files and projected them for the assembly. The display showed decades of diplomatic communications, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges, all painting a picture of humanity as enthusiastic but relatively harmless newcomers to galactic civilization. 47 years, he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. For 47 years we have known humans as explorers, traders, artists, and scientists. They've contributed to medical research, provided aid during natural disasters, and consistently advocated for peaceful resolution of conflicts. And now we discover that they've been concealing military technology that exceeds our combined capabilities. The Vorthon delegate, one of the few survivors from the destroyed mining collective, spoke with barely controlled emotion. Perhaps we should be grateful for their deception. My people are alive only because these peaceful humans arrived with weapons capable of stopping an enemy that we couldn't even scratch. This triggered a heated discussion among the delegates. Some species felt betrayed by humanity's concealment of their true strength. Others argued that the humans had proven their peaceful intentions through decades of consistent behavior. A few representatives wondered aloud whether humanity had been protecting the galaxy from threats they had never even known existed. The debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from the human embassy. Galactic Council, this is Ambassador Elena Rodriguez. I'm requesting immediate audience with the emergency session. We have critical information regarding the ongoing crisis. Zethkar granted permission, and moments later the human diplomat appeared via holographic projection. Even through the imperfect medium, her stress was clearly visible. Honored delegates, she began, I want to address the questions that have undoubtedly arisen regarding our military response to the current situation. But first, we need to share what we've learned about the enemy. The central display shifted to show tactical analysis data that was far more detailed than anything the Council's own forces had been able to gather. The attacking force originates from outside our galaxy, Rodriguez continued. Our deep space monitoring networks have tracked their approach vector, and we believe they represent an advance force for a much larger invasion fleet. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs, but Rodriguez pressed on. Based on their attack patterns and technology, we believe they are what our military analysts classify as an extinction-level threat, a force specifically designed to eliminate intelligent life across entire regions of space. Their targets have not been random. They've specifically focused on species that have joined the galactic community in recent decades, particularly those that have adopted cooperative governance models. Zethkar felt his blood chill. Are you suggesting they're targeting the Council itself? We believe they view the Council as a threat to their expansion plans. A galaxy full of cooperating species is much harder to conquer than one fragmented by constant warfare. The Andromedan delegate's crystalline form flashed with indignation. Even if this is true, it doesn't explain why humanity concealed their military strength from the Council. How can we trust allies who lie about their capabilities? Rodriguez nodded as if she had expected this question. The answer lies in our species' history, which we have simplified in our official records. She activated a new display showing Earth's history from a perspective the Council had never seen. When humanity first developed interstellar travel, we had just emerged from a period we call the corporate wars. For over a century, our species fought conflicts that nearly destroyed our civilization. Not just battles over territory or resources, but wars over the fundamental question of how intelligence should exist in the universe. The display showed images of devastated worlds, massive weapon systems, and casualty figures that made the current crisis look small by comparison. We developed our military technology in an environment where failure meant extinction. When we finally achieved peace, it was because we had become so effective at warfare that continuing to fight would have meant the complete annihilation of our species. Rodriguez paused, allowing the implications to sink in. When we encountered the galactic community, we faced a choice. We could reveal our true capabilities and likely trigger an arms race that would destabilize the entire galaxy. Or we could conceal our strength and work to build the kind of peaceful civilization we wished we had developed naturally. The Vorthon delegate leaned forward. So you chose deception. We chose discretion. Every trade agreement, every joint research project, every cultural exchange, all of it was genuine. We wanted to be the species we pretended to be, but we also maintained our military capabilities. Because our history taught us that there are threats in the universe that cannot be negotiated with. Zethkar found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about humanity. The species he had viewed as enthusiastic newcomers were actually seasoned survivors of conflicts that might have destroyed less resilient civilizations. The current crisis, Rodriguez continued, represents exactly the kind of threat we prepared for. An enemy with superior numbers and technology, driven by an ideology that views cooperation as a weakness to be eliminated. She activated another display, showing real-time tactical information from across the galaxy. Our forces are currently engaging hostile contacts in 47 systems. We're evacuating civilian populations where possible and establishing defensive positions around critical infrastructure. But we need the Council's help. Not military assistance, but coordination and intelligence sharing. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this information. The humans weren't asking for help in fighting. They were asking for help in saving the civilizations caught in the crossfire. The Setian delegate was the first to speak. What do you need from us? Evacuation support for civilian populations, medical assistance for survivors, and perhaps most importantly, help in understanding our enemy. They're using technology we don't recognize, and their strategic behavior suggests a level of galactic knowledge that exceeds our databases. Zeth Carr made a decision that he knew would define his career and possibly the future of galactic civilization. The Council will provide full support for evacuation and humanitarian efforts. We'll also grant humanity temporary emergency authority to coordinate defense of Council space. The Andromedan delegate flickered with surprise. Ambassador Zeth Carr, surely such authority requires full Council debate. With respect, Zeth Carr interrupted, we are facing an extinction-level threat, as Ambassador Rodriguez stated. The time for lengthy deliberations has passed. Humanity has the capability to fight this enemy, and they've demonstrated their commitment to protecting civilian populations. I see no alternative. As the session concluded and delegates began coordinating their species' contributions to the evacuation effort, Zeth Carr found himself wondering about the true scope of humanity's hidden strength. They had revealed enough to defeat the immediate threat, but something in Ambassador Rodriguez's manner suggested that even now, they were holding back. The galaxy was about to discover just how much humanity had been willing to sacrifice to maintain the peace they had all taken for granted. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Arsenal ship Remembrance, watching through the viewports as her ship's manufacturing bays worked at maximum capacity. Streams of raw matter flowed into the conversion chambers while completed vessels emerged from the construction. Ports a steady procession of humanity's most advanced warships being born from stellar dust and focused energy. Production rate is holding steady at 1 vessel every 4 minutes, reported her manufacturing chief. Current queue shows 237 ships awaiting final systems integration. Elena nodded, though part of her mind was still struggling to process the scale of what they were doing. The Remembrance was one of 12 Arsenal ships stationed throughout the galaxy, and each one was essentially a mobile shipyard capable of producing a complete battle fleet within days. It was technology that humanity had hoped never to reveal, much less use. Her contemplation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Admiral Chen. Captain Vasquez, we're seeing some concerning developments with the enemy force composition. I'm uploading tactical data now. Elena reviewed the incoming information with growing alarm. The enemy wasn't just using superior numbers, they were learning from each engagement. Ships that survived encounters with human forces were returning with adapted shields and modified weapons systems. More troubling, their tactical coordination was improving with each battle. Admiral, these adaptation rates are unlike anything in our projections. They're treating each engagement as a learning opportunity. Agreed, Captain. Which is why we're accelerating the timeline. How quickly can the Arsenal ships reach full production capacity? Elena consulted with her engineering staff before responding. We can triple our current output, but that means switching to emergency manufacturing protocols. Quality control will be reduced and we'll be drawing power from defensive systems. Do it. All Arsenal ships are authorized for maximum production rates immediately. As the manufacturing bays accelerated to emergency speeds, Elena found herself thinking about the civilians they were trying to protect. The evacuation efforts were proceeding better than expected. Most species had responded to the crisis with remarkable cooperation. But intelligence reports suggested that the main invasion force was still approaching, and when it arrived, the current enemy numbers would seem insignificant by comparison. Her strategic display updated with new tactical information from across the galaxy. Human forces were now engaged in active combat in over 100 systems, fighting a defensive campaign that stretched their capabilities to the limit. Each victory bought time for evacuations and revealed more about the enemy's capabilities, but the cost was mounting. Captain, her communications officer called out, We're receiving a priority transmission from the Kepler 442 system. It's Commander Torres aboard the Shanghai. The display activated to show a battle-scarred human officer, broadcasting from what was obviously a damaged bridge. Behind him, Elena could see crew members working frantically to repair systems while explosion flashes illuminated the command center. Remembrance, this is Torres. We've been engaged with a new enemy configuration, something we haven't seen before. They're using some kind of quantum resonance weapons that bypass our conventional shielding entirely. Elena felt her stomach drop. Human defensive technology was based on principles developed during the corporate wars, refined over centuries of the most brutal warfare their species had ever experienced. If the enemy had found a way to neutralize those defenses, what's your tactical assessment, Commander? They're not just adapting, Captain. They're innovating. Each engagement produces new weapon configurations we've never encountered. It's like they're using our battles as research opportunities to develop counters for our entire technological base. This was the scenario that had kept human strategic planners awake during the darkest periods of the corporate wars. An enemy that could learn faster than they could adapt. Commander, can you transmit detailed sensor readings from the engagement? Already uploaded, Captain. But there's something else. We intercepted part of their communication network during the battle. Our xenolinguistics team managed a partial translation. Elena waited, dreading what she was about to hear. They're not just trying to conquer the galaxy, Captain. They're trying to prevent it from reaching what they call convergence potential. Near as we can tell, they view cooperative civilizations as an evolutionary threat to their own development model. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a war of conquest or resources. It was an ideological conflict on a galactic scale. The enemy viewed the very concept of species working together as something that needed to be eliminated. Elena authorized emergency communication protocols and connected simultaneously to all Arsenal ships throughout the galaxy. All Arsenal ship commanders, this is Captain Vasquez. We're implementing Protocol Omega immediately. Begin production of Type 7 autonomous weapons platforms and prepare for full-scale manufacturing conversion. Protocol Omega was humanity's most closely guarded contingency plan, the complete conversion of their industrial base to military production, combined with the deployment of autonomous weapon systems that could continue fighting, even if all human crews were eliminated. Around her, the Remembrance began its transformation. Manufacturing bays that had been producing conventional warships shifted to creating something far more deadly. Autonomous hunter-killer platforms designed to operate independently for decades. Each one carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet, and they were programmed with tactical algorithms developed during humanity's darkest period. Captain, her tactical officer reported, we're receiving similar activation signals from the other arsenal. Ships. Combined production estimate shows we'll have over 10,000 autonomous platforms ready for deployment within 72 hours. Elena approved the projections, but her mind was on the broader strategic situation. The enemy's adaptation capabilities meant that conventional tactics would become less effective over time. But the autonomous platforms weren't just weapons. They were designed to learn and adapt as well, using AI systems that had been refined through centuries of simulated warfare. Captain, her science officer interrupted her thoughts. We're detecting massive hyperspace distortions at the galactic rim. Whatever's coming next is significantly larger than anything we've encountered so far. Elena accessed the deep space monitoring network and felt her blood chill. The readings showed a fleet composition that defied comprehension. Thousands of vessels, some of them larger than entire space stations. This was the main invasion force, and it was moving toward the galactic core with methodical precision. Time to arrival at the nearest inhabited systems? Approximately 6 days, Captain. 6 days to prepare for what appeared to be the complete annihilation of galactic civilization. Elena made a decision that would have been unthinkable under any other circumstances. All stations, this is Captain Vasquez authorizing activation of the Lazarus Protocol. Begin immediate deployment of all manufactured assets to defensive positions throughout the galaxy. The Lazarus Protocol was humanity's final contingency, a plan developed during the corporate wars for fighting a war of extinction against an overwhelming enemy. It involved the complete abandonment of traditional military doctrine in favor of total warfare using every available resource. Throughout human space, hidden installations began activating systems that had remained dormant for decades. Planets that appeared to be peaceful colonies revealed themselves as massive weapons platforms. Asteroid mining operations transformed into fortress systems. Even seemingly innocent space stations began deploying weapon systems that could crack planets. But the most significant change was in humanity's approach to the conflict itself. For 47 years, they had fought to preserve galactic civilization while minimizing their own exposure. Now faced with an enemy that viewed cooperation itself as a threat, they abandoned all pretense of restraint. Elena watched as the first wave of autonomous platforms launched from the Arsenal ships. Each one was a masterpiece of destructive engineering, capable of independent operation and tactical adaptation. More importantly, they were programmed with something the enemy apparently lacked: the willingness to sacrifice themselves to protect others. All Arsenal ships. This is Admiral Chen broadcasting on emergency frequencies, came the transmission from Terra Command. The main enemy fleet has been positively identified as an extragalactic invasion force. Intelligence suggests they've systematically eliminated civilizations across multiple galaxies. We are implementing total war protocols immediately. Elena felt something settle in her chest, a cold, familiar feeling from humanity's darkest period. Total war protocols meant that every human asset, military and civilian, would be directed toward the complete destruction of the enemy. It meant abandoning the careful balance they had maintained between strength and restraint. It meant becoming, once again, the species they had been during the corporate wars. "Captain," her tactical officer reported with barely controlled excitement, "the Titan stations are coming online." Elena checked her display and felt a mixture of relief and dread. The Titan stations were humanity's ultimate defensive installations, massive constructs. The main invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri system, like a plague of metal locusts. Aboard the flagship of the Convergence Elimination Force, War Primary Zethmak reviewed the tactical displays with satisfaction. The preliminary forces had provided excellent intelligence about the local species' military capabilities, and the adaptation protocols had successfully countered most of their defensive technologies. The local species, calling themselves humans, had proven more resourceful than anticipated, but their resistance had followed predictable patterns. They relied heavily on conventional physics-based weapon systems and defensive platforms that could be countered through superior technology and numerical advantage. Status report on the advance forces. Zethmak commanded through the neural interface that connected all ships in the fleet. Primary, we have successfully eliminated 17 cooperative civilization nodes. Enemy resistance has been moderate but declining. The human response forces appear to be retreating toward their core worlds in preparation for a final defensive action. Zethmak's satisfaction deepened. This was the standard pattern observed across 14 previous galactic conquests. Cooperative species inevitably fell back to defend their homeworlds when faced with overwhelming force, allowing the Convergence Elimination Force to methodically destroy their infrastructure and support networks. Begin systematic elimination of peripheral systems. Maintain pressure on human defensive positions, but do not commit to full engagement until their fleet concentration is complete. The invasion fleet spread throughout the system with practiced efficiency. 3,000 vessels, each one representing the pinnacle of extragalactic military engineering, began their methodical advance toward the galactic core. Behind them, manufacturing ships prepared to convert conquered systems into resource extraction facilities for the next phase of expansion. But as the fleet moved deeper into the system, something unexpected began to happen. Primary, reported the Tactical Coordination Network, we are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the target region. Configuration unknown, but power. Output exceeds our projections for local technological capabilities. Zethmak accessed the sensor networks directly, reviewing the incoming data with growing confusion. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases, not just more powerful than expected, but operating on principles that didn't match any known physics applications. Analysis of energy source configuration? Primary, the signatures appear to be artificial constructs of enormous size. Some exceed the mass of planetary bodies. They are awakening. Before Zethmac could process this information fully, the tactical display exploded with new contacts. Throughout the galaxy, massive installations that had been masquerading as asteroids, gas giant moons, and deep space debris suddenly revealed their true nature. The Titan stations were coming online, their weapon systems charging for the first time in nearly 50 years. Primary. The alarm in the tactical coordinator's mental voice was unprecedented. Multiple supermassive contacts are converging on our position. Estimated fleet strength. There was a pause as the coordinator processed impossible numbers. Primary, we are detecting over 50,000 vessels approaching from multiple vectors. Zethmac felt something that the Convergence Elimination Force had not experienced in 14 galactic conquests. Uncertainty. The intelligence from the advanced forces had indicated that the humans possessed perhaps a few hundred significant military vessels. The force now approaching their position was larger than some planetary populations. How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated limited manufacturing capability among all local species. Primary, it appears the human manufacturing systems were concealed. We are detecting massive industrial installations throughout their territory that were not visible during preliminary reconnaissance. On the tactical display, Zethmac watched as humanity revealed the true scope of their military infrastructure. The arsenal ships, which had seemed impressive when first encountered, were merely the visible portion of an industrial complex that spanned dozens of star systems. Each Titan station was not just a weapons platform but a complete manufacturing center capable of producing fleets that exceeded the Convergence Force's own capabilities. But the most disturbing development was the nature of the approaching human fleet. Primary, the incoming vessels are not following standard tactical formations. They appear to be operating under independent coordination protocols. Each vessel is maneuvering as an autonomous unit while maintaining overall strategic coherence. Zethmac had encountered autonomous weapon systems before, but never at this scale or level of sophistication. The approaching human fleet consisted largely of unmanned platforms, each one apparently capable of independent tactical decision-making, while coordinating with thousands of others in real time. Begin immediate defensive positioning, all vessels to maximum alert status. As the Convergence fleet attempted to arrange itself for battle, the first wave of human autonomous platforms arrived. What followed challenged every assumption Zethmac had made about warfare in this galaxy. The human platforms didn't attack in waves or follow conventional battle tactics. Instead, they swarmed throughout the Convergence formation like a living organism, each unit adapting its approach based on real-time analysis of enemy capabilities. When Convergence weapons destroyed one platform, nearby units immediately adjusted their shielding and maneuvering patterns to counter the same weapon system. More alarming was their apparent disregard for self-preservation. Human platforms routinely sacrificed themselves to create tactical advantages for other units, using kamikaze attacks not as acts of desperation but as calculated tactical decisions. Primary, we're taking significant losses. The enemy platforms are using quantum tunneling weapons that bypass our conventional defenses. Recommend immediate withdrawal to regroup and analyze their capabilities. But before Zethmac could respond, the Titan stations opened fire. The weapons that emerged from humanity's ultimate defensive installations defied every known principle of military engineering. Instead of conventional energy beams or projectile systems, the Titan stations fired something that could only be described as weaponized space-time itself. Entire sections of the Convergence fleet simply ceased to exist, removed from reality by forces that bent the fundamental laws of physics. Primary. The tactical coordinator's mental voice carried pure panic now. We've lost over 30% of the fleet in the first engagement. Their weapon systems operate on principles we cannot counter with current technology. Zethmac accessed the battle recordings, trying to understand what they were facing. The human response wasn't just superior technology. It represented a completely different approach to warfare, where the Convergence Force relied on overwhelming technological superiority and numerical advantage. The humans had developed systems that turned the enemy's own strength against them. All vessels, begin immediate withdrawal to the galactic rim. We need to reassess our approach to this conquest. But as the Convergence fleet attempted to retreat, they discovered that the humans had anticipated this response as well. The autonomous platforms had used the initial engagement to position themselves throughout the system, creating a containment field that made escape impossible. For the first time in their expansion across multiple galaxies, the Convergence Elimination Force found themselves trapped and outgunned by a species they had underestimated. And in the depths of space, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as humanity demonstrated why they had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of total warfare before choosing the path of peace. 6 months after the Battle of Centauri, Ambassador Zethkar stood once again in the Galactic Council chambers, but everything had changed. The emergency session hall now bore scorch marks from the desperate final weeks when the Council had relocated to Terra Station for protection. The delegates themselves were different too. Some species had lost entire colonies. Others had seen their homeworlds defended by human fleets that appeared seemingly from nowhere. The final casualty reports, Zethkar announced to the assembled delegates, indicate that we lost approximately 4 billion sentient beings across 17 star systems. However, intelligence estimates suggest that without human intervention, the Convergence Elimination Force would have achieved complete galactic sterilization within 18 months. The chamber was quieter than usual. The trauma of near extinction had sobered even the most argumentative species. But there was something else in the atmosphere, a mixture of gratitude and unease that permeated every discussion since the war's end. Commander Reefdahl, representing the Aquarian survivors, spoke first. I think we all owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid. They saved us when we couldn't save ourselves, but... She paused, her gills fluttering with obvious discomfort. We also need to address the implications of what we learned about our allies. The holographic display activated to show tactical recordings from the final battle. Even months later, the images were difficult to process. The complete annihilation of the Convergence fleet had taken less than 4 hours once humanity deployed their full capabilities. 3,000 vessels that had conquered. 14 galaxies had been reduced to scattered atoms by weapons that operated on principles most Council species still couldn't understand. The question before us, continued the Vorthon delegate, is whether humanity's concealment of their capabilities constitutes a fundamental breach of Council trust, or whether it represents the greatest act of restraint in galactic history. Zethkar had spent months wrestling with this question. The humans had possessed the capability to conquer the entire galaxy for decades, yet they had chosen instead to contribute to art, science, and peaceful development. They had hidden weapons that could crack planets behind facades of exploration vessels and research stations. Ambassador Rodriguez appeared via holographic projection, as had become standard since the human embassy had been overwhelmed with requests for meetings, technology transfers, and mutual defense agreements. Honored delegates, she began, I want to address the concerns that have been raised about humanity's place in the galactic community going forward. The chamber fell silent. This was the conversation everyone had been anticipating but dreading. The weapons and defensive systems you witnessed during the crisis represent the culmination of our species' darkest period. We developed them during conflicts that nearly destroyed our civilization, and we maintained them because our history taught us that there are threats in the universe that cannot be negotiated with or reasoned with. Rodriguez activated a new display, showing humanity's current military deployments. As of today, we are beginning the systematic deactivation and dismantling of our most aggressive weapon systems. The Titan stations will be converted to peaceful research and manufacturing facilities. The autonomous weapons platforms have been recalled and are being reprogrammed for defensive purposes only. The Cetian delegate leaned forward. Ambassador, surely you understand our concern. Your species possesses the capability to eliminate any threat to galactic peace, but you also possess the capability to become the greatest threat galactic peace has ever faced. I understand completely, Rodriguez replied, which is why we're proposing a new framework for galactic security, one based on transparency, cooperation, and shared responsibility. The display shifted to show a detailed proposal that had clearly been developed with extensive input from multiple species. We propose the creation of a galactic defense consortium with representatives from every Council member species. Humanity will share our defensive technologies freely, but their deployment and use will be subject to Council oversight. No single species, including humanity, will have unilateral control over galactic security. Zethkar found himself impressed by the proposal's scope. It addressed the fundamental concern that had emerged from the crisis: how to benefit from humanity's protective capabilities without creating a situation where one species held overwhelming power over all others. The Andromedan delegate's crystalline form flickered thoughtfully. This would require unprecedented levels of cooperation and trust. Most species guard their military technologies carefully. Yes, Rodriguez agreed. But the alternative is a galaxy where fear drives species apart, rather than bringing them together. The convergence force targeted us specifically because we had learned to cooperate. They viewed our unity as a threat to their expansion model. This was the crucial point that had emerged from post-war analysis. The enemy hadn't been attacking random targets. They had been systematically eliminating species that participated in cooperative governance, viewing the very concept of galactic unity as something that needed to be destroyed. There's something else, Rodriguez continued. Our deep space monitoring networks have detected similar signals from other galactic clusters. The convergence force wasn't a single aberration. They're part of a larger pattern of civilizations that expand by eliminating cooperation wherever they find it. The implication sent a chill through the chamber. The recent crisis hadn't been an isolated incident, but part of a larger cosmic conflict between cooperative and predatory models of civilization. Which is why, Rodriguez concluded, we believe galactic unity isn't just beneficial. It's essential for long-term survival. The universe contains threats that no single species can face alone, no matter how advanced their technology. The debate that followed lasted for days, but the conclusion was perhaps inevitable. The crisis had demonstrated both the value of cooperation and the price of complacency. Species that had never considered military cooperation began sharing defensive technologies. Research initiatives expanded to include joint development of new protective systems. Most importantly, the Council established new protocols for transparency and mutual defense that ensured no species would ever again face extinction alone. As the session concluded, Zethkar reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. An unintended signal, humanity's code black response, had triggered events that fundamentally changed galactic civilization. What had begun as a desperate call for help had become the foundation for a new model of cosmic cooperation. Standing at the observation deck afterward, watching human and alien vessels working together to construct the first joint defense stations, Zethkar realized that the real victory hadn't been the destruction of the convergence force. It had been the transformation of the galaxy itself into something stronger and more unified than anyone had thought possible. The humans had been right to hide their capabilities for 47 years, and they had been equally right to reveal them when the survival of cooperation itself had been at stake. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon hadn't been their technology. It had been their understanding that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary to protect what mattered most.